speakers, and I already had the pleasure of attending one of the speakers' talks. So Tim Gollins gave a talk at the, I think it was the Trust and Misinformation workshop in Glasgow earlier this year.
I think fairness and bias, I think it was.
Fairness and bias, yeah. I was just checking whether you remember what it was called, yeah. So, fairness and bias. And I have to say, I vividly remember it, and it was a great talk. So no pressure on you. And then we will have a second speaker. And when I first saw the title, DAM Industry Analyst, and I thought, what's DAM? What's DAM? And then, of course, Digital Asset Management. So this goes back to the idea that Martin posted on Search Solutions this year, which is great, that rather than asking the speakers to give us a title, he said, look, here are some interesting topics, and then I pair up two people who have different perspectives on the same topic. So I think this will be another great session where there will be very complementary views on this topic of digital asset management. So on that note, over to you, Tim. Thank you very much for joining.
Okay. Right, let's see if I can get this to work. There you go. Is that working properly?
Yeah, looks good. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Udo, and thank you to Martin for inviting me to speak today. And yes, I do hope that myself that this session does present some contrasts. My background, if people aren't aware, is I work at the National Records of Scotland, but prior to that, I worked in digital preservation at the National Archives in Kew, and I was also responsible for some of their cataloguing activities. And prior to that, I worked in the shady area of the intelligence services, which I won't talk about. Yes, fairly finding the past. Yeah, well, I always like a pun and a sort of and a bit of alliteration in my titles if I can manage it. Basically, this is around how we find things in public sector archives. So let's start at the top. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the public sector context, because there will be a lot of people perhaps who aren't familiar with the public sector context, and particularly the context in the UK. Then I'm going to start talking a little bit about the collection that we hold at the National Records of Scotland, and then about how we search that, and then provide some anecdotes, have a conversation about how we describe things, what we might do about stuff, and a short drift into the technology. This is not a talk about solutions. This is a talk about issues, challenges, and problems. And it isn't from a computing perspective so much as from a real life and human perspective, if I can manage that. So what is the public sector context? Well, in particular in the UK, public services must be fair. And this is driven in the UK by the Equalities Act 2010, which says protected characteristics, in respect of protected characteristics, policy changes must be assessed against them. So age, disability, gender reassignment, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex or sexual orientation. So all of these are protected characteristics, and anything we do in the public sector it should be, any changes we make should be checked to be neutral against these protective characteristics. This presents a challenge in the public sector, of course, across all of our activities, but we try to raise to it. But in the archival context, it presents some very particular challenges. So, what is the public sector archive context? Well, we go back in time, as ever with archives. So the first conversations about public sector archives, perhaps published in the Dutch Manual of Records Management Archiving in 1898. So what are records? Well, they're the whole of written documents, drawings and printed matter officially received or produced by an administrative body or one of its officials. Okay. We have the infamous Jenkinson publishing in 1922 with a Manual of Archive Administration, documents which formed part of an official transaction and were preserved for official reference. And then we have Schellenberg in 1956 talking about evidence of the organization of functioning of a government body that produced them, and information on persons, corporate bodies, things, problems with which the government body dealt. I haven't got the reference here, but if we look at the publication called The Rule of Law by Tom Bingham, he also talks about the concept of the evidence of the activity of government being essential for the rule of law and essential for transparency and for the citizenry to hold governments to account under the rule of law. And that's essentially what we're talking about here. It's all of those purposes. All right. So we'll now dive swiftly into the archives in the National Records of Scotland. Now, you can't see the colour of the thin slice. I can tell you that the colour of the thin slice is the light blue. Okay, so this represents. So although we literally hold 80 kilometers of records on shelves, in boxes, papers, that is the most minuscule sample of information created in Scottish society. It's a minuscule sample of information captured in records. It's a tiny sample of information captured by records in the Scottish government. So by the time we get to stuff that makes it onto our shelves, we're talking of a slice of a slice of a slice of a slice of the information that was created at the time. And that in itself presents a problem, because we should not imagine that thin slice has been in any way sampled in a statistically valid or appropriate way. It really is luck and circumstance. I once heard it described as the leaky barn model of collecting information. You place all your information on paper in a barn with leaks in it, and you wait for nature to take its course. What's left is your archive. It's a bit like that. Now, if we then expand that tiny slice into the different types of records that the National Records of Scotland holds, we can see that there's a rather interesting split. Those who are not from Scotland will not know what a seizine is. A seizine is a now 400 or 500 year old method of land title transfer that is specific to Scotland. So when we take seizines, deeds that are published or recorded for legal purposes, the Court of Session, the Sheriff Courts, and the High Court documents that we hold, that accounts for about 60% of the collection of the National Records of Scotland. So an enormous quantity of legal material. We then take the remainder of the material and it gets sliced up into lots of very fine slices at that point. We have, on the left-hand side, we have some stuff around churches, but you'll notice that the Church of Scotland dominates. So where is the representation in our collection of other religions other than the Christian religion? Well, it isn't there, to all intents and purposes. So we have stuff about plans. We also have, but on the other side we have the records of government itself. So the records created within the government. So in digital terms, perhaps the emails from Nicola Sturgeon to her colleagues in respect of the COVID pandemic might or might not make it into our collection in the future. I use that as an example. It turns out that they probably won't because of the way that records management works inside the Scottish government. But that's a completely different story. But this does illustrate that the collection is utterly biased in what is in our holdings. So we're already on a losing wicket, to mix my metaphors and to use an English phrase. How can we possibly supply a fair finding of information about the past when the collection we are crawling over, in whatever mechanism we use, is in itself intrinsically biased, and so we have huge challenges in that space. So now we'll move on to say a little bit about how an archive is searched. Well, users search a catalogue. Remember, this is 80 kilometers of paper. This isn't a digital document. This isn't a website. This isn't a crawl of the internet. This is actually bits of paper, or indeed parchment, or whatever. So how is the catalogue generated? Well, the only way to generate it is for a human being to look at the original piece of paper and enter facts about it onto a system of some kind. Now, over many decades, hundreds of years, quite literally, the NRS catalogue contains something like 3.8 million entries in respect of that 80 kilometers of material. Principally, and again, for people who aren't familiar with archives as opposed to libraries, archives don't catalogue on the basis of the subject matter. They catalogue on the basis of the context of creation. Who created it? When did they create it, and in what business context was the information created? Remember, this is a record of a transaction, back to our original conversation. It's not like a library where you have the subject matter of a book that is recorded. If we want to get philosophical, it's the distinction between epistemological and ontological view of knowledge. The libraries are epistemological. They attempt to place knowledge into a pre-coordinated system, whereas archives are essentially ontological. They attempt to capture the world as it exists and record it against the real world in some sense. This means that searching of these things is a very different kind of undertaking. Now, these things are human created. As a consequence, we have limited descriptive text. So I don't know, again, if you're not familiar with archives tend to put things in boxes. And inside a box might be one or more paper files, and inside a paper file may be one or more documents. Now, the granularity with which the descriptive text is created by a human might be at the box level. This box contains some files relating to the correspondence of George III. Well, that tells you a huge amount about the content of that box, doesn't it? Okay, I mean, you're really going to find the record, the letter between George III and somebody else on the basis that the only text you have to search for is miscellaneous correspondence of George III, right? If you're really lucky, you'll have the original, you'll have a description of the file in which it's held. If it's a civil service kind of file, you might have the file title and some dates. That'd be kind of useful. But again, you still won't find that critical letter. Or indeed, if you're really lucky, you might have the document. So for example, very recently, quite literally in the last box that was being catalogued of some court papers, a document emerged that turned out to be the trial papers of from the infamous Burke and Hare murder trial, in whatever date that was. I'm afraid my history's weak on that. that paper was not believed to have survived. It did survive. It had been kept. It was in the box it should have been in. But because nobody had opened the box and listed all of the objects inside the box, we didn't know it was there. Now we do, and it's very exciting. And I saw it the day after the young lady in fact, the day the young lady found it, I happened to be in the office next door, and I was called in, and there it was, the confession and the court papers of this guy who was subsequently hanged for all the horrible things they did with dead bodies, and killing people, and in the 18th century. Magnificent discovery. Now, when we do the description, we should use the terms that are in the document, i.e. the language of the day. But in practice, of course, those terms are filtered by the experiences and vocabularies of the cataloger at the time of cataloging. Somebody cataloging a document, a cataloger working in the 1950s would use entirely different terminology and language from a cataloger working in the 2020s, even describing exactly the same document. And that leads us to significant problems in terms of being able to find the thing. So some anecdotal examples. So let's say somebody is searching for documents in Scotland's role in the trade of enslaved persons. Okay. Well, you might speculate that these records might be found in the 18th or 19th century papers of Lord Muckety Muck of Muck. However, enslaved persons, of course, are not mentioned because that's a 21st century term. But even if we expand enslaved persons and use the terms of the day, which I won't go into because they're clearly unpleasant, we still may not find the record because actually those enslaved persons are not listed as persons at all. They're regarded as property in a property inventory that describes how compensation was paid after the abolition of slavery. And it appears in the accounts, not in any other documentation. Say we're searching for a lady, Anne Macduff, in 1750. Well, there is no mention of an Anne Macduff, but there is a mention of the wife of John Macduff. Because, of course, in 1750, many women just simply didn't appear, may not have appeared in the record in their own right. In more modern times, if we think about events in Brixton and Toxteth, were they an uprising or were they a riot? Which term to use? It's a biased term. Each of those terms is biased and has political context. Which term would the archivist have used when cataloguing those papers? So then now we have another problem. We have a problem of the user, or rather, we shouldn't have a problem of the user, but the user might have a problem with us. So do we use scholarly or utilitarian language to describe the papers? Clearly, both of those terms are rather scholarly, but anyway. So 1 in 4 of the adults in Scotland experience challenges due to the lack of literacy skills. What is the reading age of our descriptions? They're almost always created by highly educated academic people using highly academic language. Some of our records are described themselves as Byzantine. Now, okay, everyone on this call is, by the nature of this, a very educated people, so the phrase Byzantine is meaningful to you all, probably. But for these 1 in 4 people of adults in Scotland, how would they interpret the word Byzantine? What would that mean to them? So in what way are we being fair to our users? Then we have the problem of linguistic time travel. So dropsy was an exceedingly common term referring to edema due to congestive heart failure. But even the word edema in modern terms has two spellings, one with an O, one without. Which one should we use? How do we find it? Borstal Approved School, Youth Detention Centre and Young Offenders Institution. Even within the last 30 years, the terms used to describe particular institutions have changed. I'm referring here to the Her Majesty's Young Offender Institution at Polmont, which is no more than 5 miles from where I'm currently speaking from. The other thing to think about also is in certain classes of records, only the contemporary index can be used. So we can't even practically list things in a catalogue. If you want to access the Sazines, you remember I mentioned these land registry records that from before. Actually, you need to use the contemporary index to find the Sazine within the collection. So it's a two-stage process. First of all, you need to establish that you want to find a Sazine. Then you have to go to the index of Sazines and look it up. And that's not only true in Scotland. It's true for a set of papers in the National Archives in Kew called the State Papers, which contain records of the medieval law courts. And this was the collection I was referring to when I said to Martin earlier on that I could think of search systems that went back into the Middle Ages. These indexes are incredibly effective. They're still used today because they're the only way to find something in these original papers. But what can we do? Well, first of all, kind of obvious statement, nothing can be done if the record didn't survive. If it got rained on in the leaky barn, well, it's gone. We can't do anything about that. What we can do perhaps though is to try and ensure that in the future a more even-handed approach is applied to records that are being created. Unfortunately, cataloguing of paper records will be manual for the foreseeable future. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. Standards of cataloguing help, but not a lot, because standards themselves move over time, and indeed, even the interpretation of a standard of how you catalogue something shifts and waxes and wanes. Humans themselves are simply not neutral objects. We know this to be the case. And as a consequence, because archives are essentially human constructed things, archives are not neutral places. There's no point in attempting to pretend that they are. There was an idea that they were neutral. Jenkinson, I mentioned in the 1922 papers, his model of the world was that the archivist should rise above all the complexities of the world and attempt to apply a neutral view of the material available to him. Notice the way I said him there, because the archivist in 1922 was undoubtedly male, was undoubtedly white, and was undoubtedly from a very particular social class. So despite Jenkinson's appeal to neutrality, the reality is we know now looking back that there was no neutrality whatsoever. But of course, if we can understand our biases, we can try to compensate for all these things. And we can try and compensate for them in our actions, but also in our technology. So what about the technology? Well, some people say, well, clearly the answer is simple. Digitize everything. Take pictures of it. What a good idea. No, it's extraordinarily costly to digitize archival material. Even if you don't care about it surviving, which of course we do, the process of digitization is phenomenally expensive. When you have to unfold and flatten every single paper in a box of 100 papers, it takes hours to digitize even a tiny selection of a collection. And if you have to do it in such a way that doesn't damage the items, and the items can get put back in the box in a way that retains their original state, it becomes even more expensive. We also have the problem that huge amounts of our stuff is handwritten. Now, the octable character recognition of handwriting can be good. However, almost all of the examples of that are for homogeneous collections of material. Thousands of letters written in one hand can be very effectively automatically transcribed. But when you have material like this, scattered across radically different places, the idea of handwriting recognition is almost dead. So what about born digital records, the modern stuff? Oh, that'll be fine, they say. No problem at all. It's just like the web, isn't it? It's digital. We just throw Google at it. No, it makes things worse, because we have now got a collection which has fundamentally different document representatives. We've got the full text index of a piece of text that's come from our digital collection compared to the small number of words, miscellaneous correspondence George III, referring to an entire box of material in our paper collection. There is no technology that I am aware of that can compensate for that degree of fundamental bias inside the document representative and make the retrieval fair and work. The only times I've ever seen this done, it's almost always resulted in every single hit landing in a digital document from the 20th century, and no documents from the earlier collections where it simply just didn't appear in the search results. So our challenge is how we make the patchwork join up. Unfortunately, there's extraordinary little research in this area. This is not an area that is perceived to be of academic interest, although, as you can see from my passion in this, it's actually utterly fascinating from an information perspective. And unfortunately, there's no money either. But there we go. We can only hope, and we can hope that perhaps talks such as this and Martin's kind invites will result in colleagues becoming interested in this area as well and applying their great minds to the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very engaging and very interesting. And I do remember the leaky barn example that you used there, but I've learned a lot more today. So great.
Thank you.
So I think we do what we did before. So we move over to the second talk, which will take us back into the enterprise, because Theresa Regli is going to talk about searching for things in the enterprise, digital assets, so video, photography, etc. Over to you.
Hi, everyone can see my screen and hear me, I hope.
I can see a screen and can hear you. That's enough.
Yep. Perfect. Okay. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Thanks to Martin for inviting me. I've known Martin for a very long time, I guess about 20 years now. And I used to be a market analyst in the enterprise search domain. So that's how I originally met Martin. I'm based in London, in the lovely area of Greenwich. And just to give you a little bit of background, I am not an academic at all. I am 100% in the corporate world. And digital asset management has been my domain for about 14, 15 years, 100% focused on what we call digital asset management. And I've been working in broader digital transformation for about 21, 22 years now. So I'm going to talk about DAM in corporations and how digital asset management systems are used for searching and really managing different types of content and different sorts of marketing campaigns, which is completely different than what Tim just talked about, but yet you will see there are some things that are related. So I'll dive right in. Just to give you a little bit more background around my work. As I mentioned, I'm mostly in the corporate world. I focus on digital and media asset management. I do a lot of data projects, what I call data orchestration projects, but I'm really focused on marketing technology. These are some of my clients, giant corporations all the way down to small charities. I really love, especially working with museums and arts organizations. I shouldn't say I'm completely removed from academia because I do guest lecture at King's College London. So there is, if you did not know, a master's degree in digital asset management at King's College London. And my book, there's my book that I wrote in 2016 specifically on digital asset management is on that curriculum. So if between Tim and my talk you're fascinated with DAM, highly recommend getting more into it. So I'm mostly implementing these digital asset management technologies. I am much more of sort of a technology person than I am generating content. And in any given year, usually there's about 12 to 15 organizations that I work with that are implementing one of these very broad DAM systems. And unlike, Tim said there's not money in what he's doing. There's just millions and millions going into DAM in the corporate world. So it's a different sort of scenario here. And these technology solutions are really invested in by companies. Most companies are spending, $500,000 to $1 million in the first year when they are purchasing these tools. And they are really to do these things. It's to take everything that is visual, so all the things along the left, and to put them into this system that allows you to do lots of different things with them, like importing and meta tagging and cataloging and versioning, but also to search. And of course, today I'm going to specifically talk about what I see corporations doing with search in DAM systems. And then these systems are also pushing out to the different media channels. And most of the purchasers of these systems are marketers, which is why they have so much money. There's just the largest corporations in the world are spending billions every year on marketing. And the DAM system is a key element of their technology stack. And of course, they are trying to sell their products on all those channels that are along the right-hand side of the illustration here. So oftentimes DAM is justified as a large investment because it is, an engine for customer experience. It is fueling all the imagery, all the videos that we see in our apps every day, on our phone every day, and on the internet every day. Search is a very important part of this. So I like to make a difference between what I call DAM 1.0 versus 2.0. When I first started working in DAM between 15 and 17 years ago, it was really about buying these technologies to centralize these digital files and to put metadata around them. And it was that simple. It was a very straightforward business problem that everybody was trying to solve. And the reason we use this silly acronym DAM, which of course kind of makes a lot of people laugh, and this idea of an asset is because over the years, these corporations have added metadata to their files. They actually have value. So it's just like money is an asset or your house is an asset. The idea is we're, adding this value to the files. And what's happening today is that the metadata and the nature of metadata is evolving and changing. And it's much more about the customer experience, or at least as much about the customer experience and targeting customers than it is what the asset is about inherently. And I'll give you an example of that in a second, but this is about targeting customers. And in many ways, this is just a series of saved searches. And I'll show you an example of that as well. So when I talked about the evolution of asset value and sort of the evolution of digital assets in corporations, we think about the sort of traditional librarian view of this digital asset, which is just a picture of a salad, and there's spinach in it, and there's squash in it, and there's feta cheese and some pumpkin seeds. What is happening in corporations and the ways that people want to search, and I mean the business users that are managing these digital assets, the marketers that are looking for these digital assets, is that they don't just want to search what's in the photo. They don't just want to search what's in the picture. They rather want to think about the end users that they are targeting. And they want to classify things based on consumer experience. So this picture might be appropriate for vegetarians or people who have bought salad in the past, or people who like organic food, or when spinach is on sale, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of the search and the metadata is driven by eventually dynamically targeting these assets to consumers. And so it's not necessarily just the people or the marketers that are doing the searching, it's also the software that is presenting or personalizing content for the end consumer or the end shopper. It's going into a digital asset management system and it's saying, I need all the salad pictures. So it's the presentation layer that's doing it rather than a marketer sometimes. And the data models that we're creating in the corporate world now are also just much less hierarchical and more organic, or graph databases are now proliferating in corporations, which I'm sure many of you being in academia have probably worked with graph databases for a long time. In the corporate world, they're much less common and yet increasingly are being used to kind of allow the users of these enterprise applications to sort of organize and find things based on different sorts of criteria. So as an example, a digital asset, of course, might be organized in such a way that a marketer who's running a marketing campaign of some kind, would have their collection of digital assets versus a project manager that has a series of jobs that's part of a project. They would have a different collection of digital assets, but of course the same assets might be found, in both ways. So it's this idea of multifaceted search and really a series of different ways that you can find these assets based on what your corporate function is. What are you doing for the enterprise? So here's an example of that. This is a typical digital asset management system interface. And it's a hypothetical product. It doesn't actually exist, but let's pretend the brand is called Fruitful. And Fruitful is a beverage, and it comes in many different flavors. You have lime, you have grapefruit, you have lemon. And if I'm a marketer and it is my job to make sure that more Fruitful lime products get sold, this is my dashboard. And this dashboard gives me the images, which are my digital assets, but it also gives me a lot of really great information, such as product numbers, such as selling points, different sorts of content that I might want to put on social media, pictures and recipes for cocktails that I might want to use this drink in, and sort of key benefits, which is another thing that's always big, of course, for marketers if you're trying to sell something. Now, this interface is completely built with a series of saved searches, essentially, where I, as a marketer, can say, I want to always bring up all the related products in this area. And those related products might be associated based on a brand name or a product name. I want all the content that has to do with this product brought up in this other box. And I want related assets brought up in this other box. And these digital asset management interfaces are allowing internal marketers to say, here's how I want to query the collection of assets every day. These are the relationships that I want to know about. And I want that to be presented to me every time I log in. And the importance, of course, of the metadata and the metadata model on the back end, and especially in this particular example, all the relationships between the related products the selling points, the recipes, all of that structure is really important to get this to come up correctly and to have a good dashboard for a marketer to be able to build the campaign. So, marketing technology, now when I asked Martin, I said, can I show some kind of, logical sort of architecture and flow diagrams? And he said, definitely, that a lot of you have technical backgrounds. So digital asset management really has become this core or this central picture or function, I should say, within a much bigger picture. So that dashboard that I just showed, digital asset management is really just part of that, that core central repository with metadata for search. In enterprises, we now have functions like campaign planning, marketing content, collaboration tools, and oftentimes we have portals that you might be able to, as an end consumer, be able to look at a website for a single brand that is really driven by automated distribution of content based on metadata. And this is what's allowing corporations to really publish more quickly, is that a lot of it's automated. A lot of it is driven by metadata. And usually these things are aggregated based on, again, sort of a series of searches. So the content that ends up in this bigger orchestrated dashboard that I showed you, it's often coming from a whole bunch of different creation technologies. It might be coming from creative agencies, it might be coming from different data groups or product data, and it's all coming together into this bigger portal to be used. And then it gets filtered and pushed out. So all of the websites that we experience every day, the social media that we experience every day, much of that in terms of the corporate sources is automated, and it's a series of queries. And for the people that are putting together these content packages, it is a series of searches where they put things together and then boom, push it out. As I mentioned, different layers of search against the same digital asset data, essentially. So different experiences that you're building of the same content based on this presentation layer. So I'll just show you a few examples. This is a digital asset management system for the Art Fund, which is a large art charity in the United Kingdom. They help museums promote themselves. And this is what their digital asset management system looks like, where they have a series of collections here, which, they have a series called Meet Me at the Museum. They help museums get loans to fund more art, to fund more artists. But you can see here, search is really front and center. And the idea here is that I should be able to find any work of art in just about any museum that the Art Fund is supporting, and to be able to then put together my own collection to help a curator promote a museum or promote their specific exhibition. Here's another example from King's College. So what we do each semester is we give the students, and this is really my task as sort of the industry partner working with the professors, is we give the students a digital asset management assignment where they have to create digital assets and then put them in a digital asset management system and then categorize them in a whole bunch of different ways to facilitate better search. And a couple semesters ago, this was right before the pandemic, was actually as the pandemic was first hitting last spring and a year ago, 18 months ago, we had them each in groups go out and take pictures of a specific borough of London. So London has many boroughs, and we had groups of 5 or 6 students, and they would go take pictures. And so originally they categorized their pictures by borough, but then we illustrated the concept of, you can multi-categorize all these different images without duplicating the images. And this is a very important, principle for digital asset management, is that even if I have pictures from 10 different boroughs of London, I can have a separate collection called Rainy London and take pictures of, or categorize or add metadata to the pictures where it's raining, and have this multifaceted experience where if I'm just interested in the rainy pictures, I can go in there. But if I'm only interested in the pictures of Greenwich, I can go in a different way. So this facilitates all kinds of different user needs within the system to be able to do it that way. Here's another example from a charity, Save the Children, which I'm sure you've all heard of. This is a very search-driven interface where you can search by category or region or theme or keyword, and it even allows you to essentially browse, the highest level metadata, within the search results. In this case, it's a video, so you can actually play the video thumbnail from the search results once you go into the, sort of into the view, the detailed view of the asset. So I know you've all seen a gazillion search interfaces before, but I thought it would be interesting to focus a little bit more on video, because the media companies that I've worked with have really started to delve deeper in terms of their video categorization. So rather than just putting metadata around a file, you can put metadata in specific sections of the file and specific segments of the file. And this, of course, enables you, if you are searching for a specific search term, not just to have the file come up, but you can actually know, okay, this occurs at the 20th second of the video, and the system brings you right in, to that particular section of the video. So that's what this is down here. You have the time codes of this particular video, and you can go right into the the section and find exactly where they said it. And I'm going to play a video, and I hope you're going to be able to hear it. I hope. And this is my last example. And this will give you a sense of not just what the experience of a DAM is like, but it's also going to show you that it does a voice-to-text transcription, and then that transcription is automatically indexed by the search within the system. And then anybody searching for something that's spoken in that video is going to be brought right into that part of the video. And you can even click on the transcription and it brings you right in. So let's play that, and hopefully you'll all be able to hear it when it starts. The sound starts. This is a DAM system. You see someone searching for "life is long," and that's something that's spoken in the video. And it's going to play here in a second, hopefully.
Look.
Can you hear it?
Here's the thing about Diet Coke.
Good.
It makes me feel good. If you want to run a marathon, I mean, that sounds super hard, but Coke. It's delicious. It makes me feel good.
So you can see here on the right-hand side, it's the different text that's spoken, and it allows you to, when the user clicked, it took you back to that part of the video. So I'm just going to go and show you one more time so you can have a different look, and just pay attention to what happens with the mouse there, and you can see it brings you to that section of the video. Just play that one more time.
Look, here's the thing
timeline.
About Diet Coke. It makes me feel good. If you want to run a marathon, I mean, that sounds super hard, but Coke. It's delicious. It makes me feel good.
There you go. So that's pretty much my examples today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, of course. And if you'd like to, we've got time to do it now. There's my email address. There's my Twitter handle. Not that I'm on Twitter that much, but happy to talk about any of these items. I see there's things in the chat, so that's good.
Thank you very much. Excellent. I must say, Martin should never retire. He should always be running the show by putting people like you two together, Tim and Theresa. What a great match, looking at similar problems with very different perspectives. So let's see who has a question here. I saw Andy put some comment in there earlier. I tried to remember.
It's just that I noticed that a lot of what Tim was talking about, you get the same sort of problems across various domains. Yep. I mean, different names for the same products in e-commerce, so different languages used, that sort of thing. The thing that drives me mad is you want to find something. Okay, the thing that goes on the bed that you put your covers over. Now, what do you call it? Oh, it's a mattress protector. Eventually, I found out, and I guess it's something in general in information retrieval and archives. It's a difficult problem to solve, and I don't know what to do about it. If Tim's got any ideas.
So I think within, I think it's about the size of the domain. I think I can see how you might attack that problem in a fixed domain. So Amazon solve that problem when I'm looking for a mattress protector or whatever. Well, one could conceive of them developing some sort of taxonomy, some kind of enables them to navigate that space of terminology, because they have intrinsically got a limited space to traverse. I think the reason I highlight it in the archival context is because we're not only space but also time, and that not to labour the point, adds a further dimension, if I can use that expression, and it adds it's a dimension. I've even now seen conversations, or been having conversations actually with colleagues, about the idea that we will need to change our descriptions. Descriptions are simply unacceptable in the 20th century because they contain terminology or ways of referring to things that are no longer acceptable in society. And that's, but should we delete the old descriptions? Well, I don't believe we should, because the history of the archive is as interesting potentially to some people as the history of the things in the archive.
Yes.
And who's to say that anything that we do now won't be frowned on in future in any case?
Absolutely. I'm sorry, apparently I'm breaking up.
Yeah.
Connection's a bit flaky. Well. I apologize for that.
The leaky barn problem.
Indeed, the leaky internet problem.
I think to just to piggyback on Tim's comment there, I have, despite my very minimal archive experience, the corporate archives that I have worked with, usually as a sort of corollary to the marketing systems that I work with, they do want to keep those old ways of describing things. So I saw one of the questions came up there about, something that's called a health drink today. Maybe you want to call it a low calorie refreshment later. I've been in incredibly long debates about what something should be classified as when it comes to a product. And I mean, the nice thing about these modern DAM systems is that they allow you to manage multifaceted terminology and synonyms and multiple ways of presenting. And this is especially relevant for big global corporations because they might want to call something completely different, of course, in one market versus another. And
absolutely.
And even historically, I mean, printers, for a long time, HP was one of my clients, and the debates about, do you call this an all-in-one printer? Do you call it a multi-purpose printer because it, faxes still, or because it does, all these different things. And those debates, unfortunately, never seem to cease, but they're also healthy. And I think it's also relevant, I would imagine, Tim, you'd agree, from an archival perspective, you do want to know what people used to call things because it is historically relevant, right?
Absolutely. In fact, it's very interesting. You're describing, I was struck by your graph that actually the latest approaches that are being developed, there's a project, if anyone's interested, there's a project called Project Omega at the National Archives in Kew, and it's looking at the use of graphs for archival descriptive databases, precisely for this reason, that it permits time travel of the descriptions, but it also permits, in principle, multifaceted multifaceted tagging, aligning, collecting and clustering of material in exactly the same way you were describing with those digital assets, but for historical assets. The driver is different, but the underlying information structures are going to look remarkably similar in my view. I mean, that's only literally in development right now. I suspect it will be the first in the world when it's launched. But it is sort of leading the way in terms of the way archival cataloging is moving to take account of these issues that I've been describing. And when we spoke before, I was utterly struck by the similarity between the corporate context and the context. And also equally struck by the difference in financial to our disposal.
No, there's plenty of money going into DAM in my world, that's for sure. I see I got another question that I just thought I might address. Somebody said that about adding value to digital assets, and I perhaps I didn't describe that well enough. So in my world, the value is metadata. And I think that's probably the case for anything you're trying to search. That's the nugget that brings it up and makes the search work. And I think that what I've seen in the evolution of value is that over time, there should be, we're using this term now in digital asset management in the corporate world, which is, data supply chain. Basically data moves along some kind of process in every organization. And oftentimes that data needs to be associated with the digital asset to make the search work, right? And that supply chain is, okay, where's the data coming from? Who has to supply it? And who's actually tagging the asset and how is it getting there? All of that tagging adds the value. So we have more and more different types of metadata now that we didn't think about 10 years ago in the corporate world. Like, what is the demographic that we're going to target this to on social media? Or what is the buyer segment that we know about that we can promote this product to? And that's what I mean by value. It's the metadata around the asset, and it's getting more and more rich as time goes on.
If I may leap in, Leaf has come up with something that's spot on, actually. In the archive world is that I can have the most interesting and intrinsically valuable collection in the world sitting on a shelf, but if I do not have metadata that point object by object, it is valueless to my client, to my public. It's absolutely useless. Is that as we catalog, suddenly the intrinsic value in our collections can become realized value. We can market, archivists market stuff, we sell stuff. Scotland's People is a commercial entity selling information to the genealogical community. Value is in the, as you say, Leaf, it's the value of is found. And we have to one of the considerations is targeting the human cataloging resource to the right type of content. I mean, it's a different scale and different type of thing, but it's exactly, I think, what you were talking about, Theresa, that to decide what's the facet you want to target to construct the right metadata to make the thing findable in the right context.
In the corporate world, I will say that the value, it's measurable because it increases sales, and that's the ultimate goal of digital asset management in my world is, are we selling more of the product? And the more, there is, I believe, a finite limit to what is actually useful metadata in the corporate world. And it's really about sales targeting, marketing channels, sales channels, and are the sales going up? And is the even in a context of a museum, are you getting more people into the museum?
Precisely. Like the same with us. Do we get more footfall? Do we get more hits on that collection? Do we get more downloads of the collection? It may not be in cash terms in a public archive, but it is. but once we get into the online world, it becomes metricatable, it becomes manageable.
I think we could go on forever here, and in a minute we will, but I will hand over the responsibility to Martin, because he will be chairing the next session, which will be probably picking up from where we leave here, because we want to come up with sort of ideas of what did we learn, what are the take-home messages. What I always like, by the way, are quotes like Theresa's just a minute ago. In my world, the value is metadata. I will sneak these things into my lectures every now and then. I like it. This is sort of stuff that I like. I also noticed that Tim was actually mimicking the transformer-based models like BERT. He was just leaving out individual words, and we had to predict what word he had masked there. But I think towards the end was getting better. So I think in the end we did actually get everything.
I'm sorry, technology.
No, but that's modern technology. That's what I'm saying. So we are all being trained on your speech. So I think there's still a few more comments there. So I think you picked up some of Leif's comments, and also there was a question that Michael asked, which maybe we can move into the next session. And so Martin, I think I have an hour off. I can just sit back, relax, and ask Gregor to bring me a bottle of beer from the beer fridge.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great. Over to you. Thank you very much. That was an excellent session. I really liked it.
Okay. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.